Uh, okay, so my name is Wei Ling. I came from Apple. I'm currently evaluating a few options like connectivities. I'm trying to use more on some of the projects I'm working on. I may also get a little bit into the code and the software. Hopefully, I can in the future contribute a few things there. But for the meantime, mostly is starting using it and get familiar with that. And also want to know the update and all your discussions, and so I can follow up with different issues I'm facing.
Okay, I think the last one is Mayank.
Yeah, hi. Hi, I'm Mayank. Like I work at Microsoft. I got involved in the community last week, last week. So I'm just from open source side. My work does not actually involve this, but this looks like a cool project. So just wanted to contribute any way I can. Yeah, cool. That's all actually.
Thanks. I also see that, so I'll just state for the record, we had gone around the circle to introduce ourselves and only started recording sort of part of the way through. Maybe Walter, could you properly begin the recording with the usual community spiel?
Sure. No one started oh, you have started the recording. Okay. Hi, I'm Walter. This is the SIG Cloud Provider APIServer Network Proxy meeting. As always, this meeting is sponsored by the CNCF, and we're beholden to the CNCF and their general rules, most of which amount to please be respectful and thoughtful of one another. Please obey the golden rule, do to others as you'd have them do to you. And with that, yeah, go ahead, Joseph, take it away.
Yeah, so I think it might be worth repeating some of the stuff that I said before we started recording for the sake of the recording. Repeating myself, I have an update for this open source working group, which is that I am leaving Google. I've been working with my manager and my team for a few weeks now on this, but I wanted this working group to know because I've played some role in this repository and component. Part of my smooth transition has been giving Avrit on my team, he's on my immediate team, some within GKE knowledge transfer and duty handoffs. And then my other colleague, Azim, who is in the Warsaw time zone and office, I've given him some knowledge transfer more on the open source side. And in my future absence, he'll be able to get, I would say, some historical knowledge from Walter and this working group, hopefully. So that's been announced. And Avert and Azim, maybe for the recording, do you mind reintroducing yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Avret. I live in Seattle and work with Joseph on Google Kubernetes Engine. Azim, do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Once again, I'm Azim. I'm currently based in Warsaw. I also work at Google. I've joined like some time ago. It hasn't been like 6 months yet. So overall, I'm new to connectivity, so learning a lot. Thanks, Joseph, for all the introduction, for code-based tour, and like introducing to the project. So this is going to be a lot of fun. So like my current team in Google is control plane, but as a side quest, I've taken connectivity open source. So I'll be like hopefully contributing to this project, connectivity. So that's it.
Great. So I think if introductions are out of the way, I think on the agenda, I think, Averett, you mentioned it before we started recording, but I'll repeat it for the sake of recording. Averett is planning to host an intern in Google GKE who will implement the agent server count dynamic, make it dynamic issue. And then do you mind filling in the link with the issue number and the agenda? And then I don't know if you want to talk about it in any further detail.
But like, is the broad link not enough, or do you want me to like shorten it down to just 273?
Oh, it's 273. Okay, 273.
Yep.
Great.
Yeah, I just wanted to. So it seems like there are a few potential implementation options for the connectivity server side. I just wanted to get a better understanding of what the alignment will be with the community to better support my intern and kind of reduce the unknowns for their time here because it's relatively short. I think 3 months or something. So just kind of wanting to get a little bit of a preview of how the design consensus will be reached, and then anything I need to know to support them for making the commits to the repository. So yeah, I don't have anything super specific, but just kind of wanting to hear any feedback that the community has based on that.
So I will start. What exactly is the change, and more importantly, where is the change?
Yep. So we are wanting to. So currently in Proxy server, there's a command line flag that tells the server how many servers there are in the cluster, and then my understanding is Proxy agent, when it dials the server, part of the initial response is that server count. And there's been some previous work on the agent side to continuously redial and get an update for the server count. That influences the agent to know how many different servers does it need to try and connect to get those distinct connections. On the server side, it's still a static, just a command line flag to the process. And we are wanting to make that more dynamic so that we don't have to restart the process to update that number on the server side.
Okay, so my first take would be, so the good news is not directly in Kubernetes. If you're making changes to the API server itself or that communication, I would suggest we're probably looking at needing to do a cap. So the good news is I don't think we need to do a cap.
Yep.
But I do think that this is involved enough that, one, I think a proper design doc. I'm guessing, although I will defer to Joseph on this one since he understands that particular piece a little better than I do, that we are talking about a messaging change between the agent and the server.
I'm not so sure, actually. I'm not sure we need it.
Okay. So it is potentially has a messaging change. So if it doesn't have a messaging change, then I think we just need to have probably a one pager, and with an emphasis on things like what the options are and backward compatibility. If we do end up having a messaging change, then I think I would want a little bit more. And we've talked about messaging changes in the past. If it involves a messaging change, then I think I would want to see us add some actual testing to make sure that on agent server mismatch that the new messages are properly ignored and don't cause negative side effects. But that would be my general take on, but obviously it's an open source community and other contributors can have other opinions.
Yeah, Averett, maybe we could actually get into some of the detail. So I dropped a link to issue 273 in the meeting notes, as well as this Zoom chat thread. I don't know if somebody is able to present maybe and present that issue. But on the issue page, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, that's the latest design suggestion that I know about. And it might be worth just going over it a little bit in this forum, because I think it hasn't had discussion much at all recently. But the latest idea on the table was, if we change proxy server to, in addition to the static server count flag, which is what we have today, and that's all we have today. Just as some context, proxy server is already a client of APIServer. The only API it calls today is token review. But the fact is that it is a client of APIServer, a direct client, unlike a connectivity agent. So the latest proposal on the table is connectivity server could, in addition to token review API calls, could take advantage of, I suppose the term is, so taking inspiration from APIServer identity, which I think might use leases under the cover. Proxy server could basically do the same, where it uses lease objects with some TTLs to basically have a distributed quorum of the server count. I don't know the details of that technology, but on first glance, it seems like it would be sufficient. And then there's no server to agent or client to server protocol change. It's just the set of proxy servers in a cluster talking to the same API servers quorum, learning about the existence of each other. If you scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll see that idea. There's a lot of stuff at the top about the agent changes that have already been implemented.
So is the TLDR of that idea, when an agent starts, or just periodically a server will create a lease with a TTL, and then it will also query all the server leases to get a count for unique servers, and then use that instead of the command line flag.
Yeah.
And then I think the other alternative mentioned already is add a new command line flag, like server count file. And then that just reads from the file system and parses out an int from the file or whatever. And then if we want to update the server count, we can just update the contents of that file.
Right. I see Walter has a hand up.
What do you expect to happen when, so you talk about using do you literally mean like the leader election code or something else?
Again, I don't think this is leader election. I think this is just each server writes a lease object for itself, declaring its identity existence. And then each server also scans for all appropriately, filtered leases to essentially discover the set of other servers with an appropriate TTL.
Okay.
And then to contrast that with Averett's other alternative he mentioned, I don't know if that's referenced earlier in this same issue or somewhere else, but it could be that an alternative, if this is not agreeable, it could just be sort of the responsibility of the cluster administrator to perform the calculation of server counts with some other private cloud provider mechanism, and then make it available to each proxy server in a file that could be dynamically loaded by the proxy server. So I think, I obviously prefer the simpler least base approach, but yeah.
What sort of lease were you thinking, like 5 minutes or?
That's a great question. I hadn't thought in too much detail.
I think another question is, what are the failure modes? I guess, like, do we expect do we expect people to already have potential like deny rules, except for very specific lease paths that could like break this? So are we creating another way customers could potentially break things if we go with the lease direction?
Yeah, and let me add one thing to what Averitt just said. Sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly.
No, it's correct. Thanks.
If the failure that Averitt suggested happens, one of the downsides is that calling a webhook is done over the network proxy. So anything that could deny webhook calls can be a self-fulfilling prophecy, where you can't call the webhook because the API server network proxy isn't running, and the API server network proxy can't run because the webhooks aren't being able to be called.
Yeah, so the webhook issue is very critical. Most logs, exec, we can ignore in case some failure, but if the webhook is down, entire control plane will be down because mostly used for the server management, etc. So this is a critical path.
Yeah, I completely agree. So the one thing I would suggest would be that, yeah, whatever we design should probably be resilient to the lease not being able to be written. So, my general thinking would be maybe we need a lower bound on what a command line configurable lower bound. And so we will always try to connect to a certain minimum number. So you can use the leases to get a higher count, but there's a lower one that will always be provided, and that the proxy server isn't going to stop. Like it should take care of writing itself to the lease on a side channel or a go routine, not on the main path, so that it doesn't block waiting to get the lease written. And that's just a suggestion, but I think something like that, as as Welling has, hopefully I'm pronouncing that as well, but it has said, this cannot be allowed to block. These systems are too important.
Yeah, that's a great point about reliable, basically, cluster creation. It's easy to think about we're going from 3 to 4 control plane nodes case, but more critically, we have to have reliable, expedient cluster creation. And if it can't write a lease object, that would be a showstopper. Yeah. So minimum server count is a good safety idea. I would probably do a different flag than server count. So maybe server count static or a pair of flags.
Sounds like great contents for the design doc. I look forward to reading it.
I think we're at time. So I unfortunately don't have any time to maybe describe in some detail some of my PRs related to agent drain, but I'm looking for feedback on those set of PRs.
So the nosy among us, Joseph. Obviously this is open source, so your absence from Google, while I'm fairly sure sad for the Google folks, doesn't necessarily have to be sad for us. So can we expect you to stick around, or are you off to newer and brighter fields?
Thanks for your question. No, I'm not going anywhere. My plans are to enjoy the summer with family. I've been telling my team, please plan for zero work from me in open source, particularly around like creating new version tags to resolve CVEs, for example. But I would say that, you know, probably the joy of working on it might still have me coming around and having some participation. But I just don't want Google or GKE to sort of plan for that, right?
Makes
And I
sense.
also, on that note, or along those lines, I don't think it would be, I would feel a little bit inappropriate maybe jumping in and really like spearheading like the dial simplification protocol change that we have discussed, or like pushing this enhancement from beta to GA. I think I would sort of rather have a cloud provider that's actively using it be more holding the reins.
That makes sense. Well, thank you greatly for what you've done so far, and we look forward to at least having you around a bit more so that we can chat.
Yep.
All right, and with that, maybe we stop the recording.